Ready.
All right, we're going to go ahead and call the case. This is Street versus Taylor. Are the parties present and ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. Would you like our formal introductions for the record?
Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Adam Leidig, and I represent Jordan Street individually and on behalf of Rory Street, the decedent, and we're ready to proceed to housekeeping.
Defense?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is William Booth, and today I'm joined by my second chair, Miss Samantha DiGiuseppe. And together, we represent Miss Reese Taylor in today's case, and we do have some housekeeping matters and a few stipulations to read onto the record.
Okay, we're going to take up housekeeping first, and then we will move on to any pretrial matters that need to be addressed before opening statements. Okay. Mr. Is it Leidig?
Yes, Your Honor, it's Leidig.
Mr. Leidig, you can lead off.
Okay. Your Honor, may we assume that all witnesses have been sworn prior to testifying?
Yes, you may.
And Your Honor, the exhibits have been pre-marked based in the record. May those exhibits retain those original markings?
Yes, we'll be using those numbers.
Your Honor, may we have the correct pronunciation of your last name?
Stormeyer.
Stormeyer, okay.
Yes, sir. Silent H, long O.
Okay, easy enough. And with that, we're ready to proceed to motions.
All right, Mr. Booth, did you have any housekeeping matters to take up?
Yes, Your Honor. First, we ask that you invoke Rule 615 to constructively sequester all non-party representatives who are going to be witnesses in trial today.
Very well. We are constructively invoking the rule at this time.
And finally, Your Honor, because of the online format of this jurisdiction, I ask permission to remain seated during examinations and statements.
Yes, you're welcome to. Just stay within the realm of your camera.
Yes, Your Honor, I won't be going anywhere. And with that, we're ready to move on to those stipulations.
Okay, one issue of housekeeping matter from the court. I'll be keeping time for you, and so I will give you a time check after plaintiff's close of your case in chief, and then after the defense's case in chief as well, right before closing arguments. Other than those short time checks, we're going to just kind of keep rolling through things with as minimal amount of breaks as possible. So you're welcome to grab a drink, take a quick break while I'm doing the math. Hopefully it won't take me that long. But other than that, we're going to stick to a pretty tight time schedule. All right, Mr. Leidig, did you have some pretrial matters?
Yes, Your Honor. To kick things off, I'd ask that the court, and based upon your pretrial order, number 3 with exhibits, that has been already identified by yourself, Your Honor, that exhibits 16, 17, 18, 19, and 21 have been pre-admitted into evidence. These are expert reports from both the plaintiff and defense in today's case, as well as the weather report for the day that Rory died.
Yes, those have been pre-admitted.
And Your Honor, Mr. Booth and I had a pretrial conference prior to jumping on the Zoom call, and we had got a lot of agreement. We agreed to stipulate Exhibit 3 into evidence, as well as Exhibits 14 and 15. Exhibit 3 is the picture of Rory Street. Exhibit 14 is her autopsy, and Exhibit 15 is the toxicology report that was done after she unfortunately passed.
Mr. Booth, does that reflect your understanding as well?
Yes, Your Honor, that's accurate.
Okay, then with no objections, we will admit Exhibits 3, 14, and 15 into the evidence.
Yes, Your Honor. Our second motion also came to an agreement by Mr. Booth. We agreed to exclude any sort of conclusion that Jess Merriweather may have in regards to an expert conclusion on whether or not Coach Taylor ran an appropriate and safe practice.
Does that reflect your understanding, Mr. Booth?
Yes, Your Honor. And just to clarify, opposing counsel did mention that it's expert testimony, any sort of opinion based on expertise. That's not going to be, we're not going to be getting into that. Miss Merriweather's observations on that day that don't reach to an expert opinion, we may get into, but any sort of expert opinion, we won't be.
Okay, so just to be sure that everyone's on the same page, the actual statement that Mr. Merriweather may make about whether or not Coach was acting appropriately is not being excluded. You're just asking that he not be proved up as an expert to give that opinion.
Well, actually, I think the opinion that Miss Taylor's actions were appropriate, that is the kind of opinion I think that we discussed wouldn't be coming into evidence. But observations, direct observations by Miss Merriweather about Coach Taylor's actions and Rory Street's actions, those are not covered by those stipulations and are still fair game.
You can say what she saw, but she can't give her opinion on whether or not it was appropriate.
That's my understanding, Your Honor.
Yes,
All right, I have noted that in the record, and I think we understand what you're talking about. Anything else, Mr. Leidig?
No, Your Honor. With that, the plaintiff is ready for opening statements.
Mr. Booth, any pretrial?
Yes, Your Honor, just one more stipulation to read onto the record. Before coming to court today, I spoke with Mr. Leidig, and we agreed that there's going to be no testimony or evidence in this trial relating to Coach Taylor's reason for leaving a past job at University High School.
Mr. Leidig, does that reflect your understanding?
Yes, it did.
Very well, we've read that into the record.
And with that, Your Honor, we're ready to proceed.
All right, very well. We will go ahead and start with opening statements. Mr. Leidig, you have the floor, and you can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. And may it please the court. Good afternoon. Today, we're going to learn how far a high school coach is willing to go to make sure that she's known as the best coach in the county. How many rules she's willing to break. How many lives she's willing to put at risk. How many students she's willing to punish. And on September 7th of 2018, we're going to learn that the defendant's desire to win at all costs cost the life of Rory Street, a young 18-year-old woman. This is Rory. She died on September 7th, 2018. Your Honor, we as the plaintiff hold the burden of proof in today's case. And we must prove to you by a greater weight of the evidence that the defendant, Reese Taylor, is liable for the death of Rory Street. And we'll do so by establishing what happened before, during, and after the defendant lost her temper on that fateful day. But before we discuss that any further, I'd like you to meet Rory. Rory was born and raised right here in Waco. She was a good daughter, a good student, a good athlete. She was one of the top athletes actually on her high school soccer team, something that she was proud of. But like with all good things, sometimes there's bad things that crop up. Bad things because her love for soccer brought her directly to the defendant, Reese Taylor, the coach of her soccer team. And just like we got to meet Rory, well, we're going to meet the defendant as well. We're going to meet the defendant through testimony and evidence today. Testimony and evidence that'll show the type of coach the defendant is. The type of coach that puts personal success over student safety. The type of coach that is willing to risk it all to get what she wants, the win. Coach Taylor, when she took to the field on September 7th of 2018, well, that was just a normal day for her. A normal day where at the end of the field, she didn't see her students. She didn't see her athletes. She saw the win. The state championship that had eluded her year after year. But what stood in the way of that win was the heat. We're going to learn that day that it was almost 105 degrees on that fateful day. Too hot to breathe. Too hot to think. Too hot to play to coach's standards. And to anybody else, well, not playing to par would be understandable. But to the defendant, the signs of fatigue from the heat were just signs of weakness that needed to be beaten out of these students. And unfortunately on that day, Rory was showing signs of fatigue. Instead of the coach asking Rory if she needed a drink, if she needed a break, if she was just doing well, the coach decided to punish her. She ordered Rory to Burma Road, where she did sprints down the field, nonstop in the beating down hot sun. But when that wasn't good enough, Coach Taylor had Rory doing bear crawls, nonstop in the hot sun. And then when that wasn't enough, Coach Taylor got creative. She needed to do something new to punish Rory for falling behind what the coach wanted. And so she took a normal drill, the slide tackle drill, something we're going to hear about today, but she modified it into her own twisted form of punishment. On one side of the field sat fatigued Rory, pale, breathless, gasping for life. But on the other side, 15 of her teammates, like Coach Taylor's own hit squad, lined up in a firing squad formation with one goal and one goal only. Then when Coach Taylor gave the word and the defendant blew the whistle, like a shot ringing out, one teammate after another would tackle Rory. Each time the coach blew the whistle, a teammate hit Rory. And each time Rory hit the ground, and each time Rory struggled to get back up. And we're going to hear all about that from Aubrey Saracen, a bystander, one of Rory's best friends and teammates. But unfortunately, on that 15th time that Rory hit the ground, well, something was different. This time, Rory never got back up. All because the coach lost her temper. Your Honor, at the end of today's case, after we've seen the evidence, after we reviewed all the testimony, we're going to learn that there's no excuse for the coach's behavior. There's no excuse for the conduct the defendant displayed on that day, for losing the temper and causing Rory to die. And because of that, Your Honor, we ask that you find the defendant liable for 18-year-old Rory Street's death. Thank you.
Opening, Mr. Booth?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
May.
May it please the court, counsel. No one could have seen this coming. On September 7th, 2018, Rory Street passed away. We don't blame her mother, Jordan Street, for wanting answers about her child's death. In the wake of a sudden loss, that's only natural. But sometimes, in the search for answers, you learn something that you don't want to hear. Your Honor, this is one of those cases with a fact that would be difficult for any parent to hear about their child. But when Rory Street passed away, she had cocaine in her system. And that's a fact that her parent didn't know, that her coaches didn't know, that her teammates, that her friends did not know. And Your Honor, it's likely that Rory didn't know that combining cocaine with intense physical activity in 105-degree weather, she probably didn't know that that was a dangerous combination. Nobody could have predicted that Rory Street would pass away at soccer practice. And the law tells us that if her death wasn't reasonably foreseeable, well, then you can't hold Coach Taylor responsible. Now today, I'm proud to represent Coach Reese Taylor. Coach Taylor has dedicated 26 years of her life to teaching and coaching student athletes right here in Waco. And for the past 6 years of her career, she spent her time teaching the Waco varsity soccer coach. And she's a really good coach. Over those past 6 years, she's led our girls soccer team to 5 district titles. when Miss Taylor takes the stand today, she's going to tell you that while she pushes her players to be the best that they can be, and she does discipline them when it's appropriate, she still cares about each and every one of them. And when Rory Street passed away at soccer practice on September 7th, 2018, well, no one was more stunned than Coach Taylor. She just couldn't believe that it had happened. No one saw it coming. Now today, the plaintiff brought this case into court, and they have the burden of proving every element of their claim. Now the plaintiff must prove to you that Miss Taylor acted negligently towards Rory Street on September 7th, and that negligence was a proximate cause of Rory Street's death. As a part of that, they're going to have to prove to you that Rory Street's death was a foreseeable result of Coach Taylor's actions. And as you listen to testimony today, you're going to learn that they can't meet that burden. Now, the plaintiff just spent some time telling you that Coach Taylor's behavior wasn't acceptable. But when you listen to the evidence in this case, you're going to learn that there was just nothing unreasonable about soccer practice on September 7th. You'll hear that soccer practice started at the usual time on the same field that Waco High has been practicing on since Coach Taylor was a student there. And while the temperatures did reach 105 degrees that day, Your Honor, it's Waco, Texas in September. That's what it's like around then. Every other practice, the students on that soccer team practice in that heat with no problem. And like at every other practice on September 7th, you're going to hear that Coach Taylor brought water and that an athletic trainer was there to keep an eye on them. You're also going to hear that when Coach Taylor was running practice, if she saw a student goofing off, well, that student was disciplined. And that discipline included physical activity just like it would for any sport. The plaintiff's own witness, Miss Aubrey Saracen, she's going to tell you that she was disciplined in the exact same way as Rory Street. When she was goofing off, she was sent to go run sprints on Burma Road. And that's a drill that Waco High School has been using for decades. Again, they've been doing that since Coach Taylor was on the team. You're going to hear today about how Coach Taylor conducted that practice, and you're going to learn that there wasn't anything unreasonable about it. Now, when Coach Taylor takes the stand, she's going to tell you about what happened on that day. And as you listen to her testimony, you're going to learn that she just wasn't the cause of Rory's death for another important reason. She had no idea that Rory had cocaine in her system at the time. And without knowing that key piece of information, Coach Taylor just had no way to foresee, no way to know that Rory was going to suffer the harm that she did that day. Just wasn't foreseeable. Now today, you're going to see an expert report written by Spencer London, an expert in toxicology who's been studying cases like these for 15 years. It's Mr. London's opinion that Rory Street's death was caused by a cocaine-induced heat stroke. And that's why we've raised an affirmative defense in this case in response to the plaintiff's allegations. We've put ourselves in a position to prove that Rory Street's decision to ingest cocaine before practice on September 7th, unfortunately, that's what caused her death. Your Honor, I started out by telling you that no one could have seen this coming. And the sad reality of this case is that that includes Rory Street. I'm sure she had no idea the level of danger she was putting herself in when she chose to use cocaine sometime before practice that day. And our hearts go out to Miss Street for what she's going through. I can't imagine how tough it is. But at the end of today's trial, one thing will be clear. Coach Taylor just isn't responsible for Rory Street's death. And that's why I'm going to ask you to find her not liable. Thank you.
All right, with that, we will move on to to the plaintiff's case in chief. Just as a matter of note for everyone in the Zoom call, if you are booted off the call, I put my phone number in the chat, so you can copy that down real quick and just get a hold of me if we need to pause trial and get you back on there. So I will post that right now. And Mr. Leidig, you can go ahead and start your direct examination whenever you're ready.
Put your phone number down first and we'll. Okay. The plaintiff calls Aubrey Saracen. Okay. Ms. Saracen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Your Honor, may I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the court.
I am Aubrey Saracen.
Ms. Saracen, what do you do for a living?
I am a student. I just graduated high school and I'm heading to Rice University in the fall.
What high school did you go to?
Waco High.
And how were your years at Waco High?
They were great. Up until last year, I was on the soccer team all 4 years on the varsity soccer team. And it was, high school.
When you were on the high school soccer team, did you know Rory Street?
Yeah, she was one of my best friends.
Did you meet Rory in high school?
No, we had actually known each other basically our whole lives. We grew up playing youth soccer together and club soccer, and then we finally were on the varsity team together in high school.
You probably know Rory better than anyone here. Tell us about her.
Rory was amazing. Honestly, I think that she was capable of anything she put her mind to, and especially soccer. She was just an incredible athlete and an amazing friend as well.
Do you know what position she played on soccer?
She was a forward.
Okay. I'd like to talk to you more about your Waco High soccer practices. Tell us about a typical practice at Waco.
So we would start after school, so about 3:15, 3:30-ish every day. Now we had Coach Taylor the whole time, and she was really, really tough. So it involved a lot of sweating, some crying. We ran a lot in the hot Texas sun. And yeah, it was hard work.
Did you know Coach Taylor all your years at Waco High?
Yes.
And you said that Coach Taylor was a tough coach. What do you mean by that?
She just didn't take any business from anyone. She would make you run drills if you weren't paying attention or you did something wrong. She sent a lot of people to Burma Road while we were there. Yeah, she cared about her team, but she wanted to win, and that showed.
Would you ever see the defendant lose her temper at either you or one of your teammates?
Yeah, all the time.
Now, you mentioned Burma Road earlier. What's Burma Road?
So it's a drill that's kind of a Waco High tradition, I guess. It's where coach makes you run for 30 yards and then you have to dribble a ball for 30 yards and then you kick it into an open goal and then you have to do bear crawls on your hands and feet all the way back to the starting line for 60 yards. And then basically you just repeat that over and over until coach says you can stop.
Why would coach make players run Burma Road to the best of your observations?
I think it's for conditioning or something. It's if you're not playing very well on the field, if you miss a goal, if you miss a pass, that kind of thing.
I'd like to talk to you about September 7th of 2018. Were you at soccer practice that day?
I was.
Did you see Rory that day?
Of course, yes.
To the best of your recollection, what was the weather like?
Hot. I mean, it was September in Texas, so it was really, really hot.
During those practices, did you ever get a break?
I don't remember having a break during that practice, but we usually got a couple of water breaks.
And specifically on September 7th, do you remember any water breaks on that day?
I don't remember taking one.
Tell us about how practice went that day.
So we started practice. It was a scrimmage day. I was missing some passes, so I got sent to Burma Road, and I was running that for a while. And then I heard Coach yelling at Rory because she started to play pretty sloppily, I guess. And she said she was being useless on the field, so she better get her butt over to Burma Road. And so she came and joined me over there.
You said she said that Rory was being useless. Are you referring to the defendant?
Correct. Yeah, Coach Taylor.
After the defendant said that Rory was being useless and sent her to Burma Road, did you ever talk with Rory?
Yeah, she didn't look like she felt very well, so I asked her what was wrong, and she told me that she was having some chest pain and that she just kind of felt funny.
You said she looked like something was wrong. What did you observe?
She was pale, and she just looked like she didn't feel very good.
Approximately how long did you run with Rory?
I was running for about 15 minutes before she came and joined me, and then we ran for a few more minutes together. So a couple of Burma rotations before Coach pulled her over to the other field.
Why did Coach pull her to the other field?
I guess she wasn't satisfied with her Burma Road. I don't really know, but Coach pulled her over to do this slide tackle drill that she had never done before.
What's a slide tackle?
So a slide tackle is a pretty common tactic in soccer where you try to get the ball away from somebody else by sliding in, kind of like you would to a base in baseball, to get the ball away. And so you're going in feet first, and a lot of the time it ends up with the person dribbling the ball being knocked over.
You said that you've never seen this drill before. What did the drill look like?
Well, so the drill was just everybody on the team lined up, and then one by one. So Rory would be dribbling the ball, and then one by one, each person would run full speed at her and do a slide tackle on her. So it was only Rory dribbling, and then everyone else had to do the tackle.
When you were seeing any of this, did you ever go and talk to the defendant and tell them what you heard Rory say to you?
No, usually when we complained about not feeling well or anything, Coach just made us do some other sort of drill.
Objection, Your Honor, as improper character evidence.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. This is not improper character evidence. Rather, this is the witness's rationally based perception as to what has happened before, and she can observe that. And we're also not saying that Coach Taylor was going to actually act in that way, but rather based on her own personal foundation on Coach's actions, which is why she didn't go and tell Coach Taylor what she'd heard.
Overruled, Mr. Booth. You can continue, Mr. Leidig.
Ms. Harrison, would you like me to re-ask the question?
Sure.
Why didn't you tell the defendant that Rory wasn't feeling well?
Because usually when we told Coach that we weren't feeling well, she told us to suck it up and keep playing, or she would tell us to go run Burmas or something like that. She was really tough on us, like I said.
I'd like to talk to you more about the new drill you just described. Did you see any of your teammates hit Rory with a slide tackle?
Yeah, they knocked her over every time they tackled her.
About how many times did Rory get hit by one of your teammates?
About 15 times. I think she had to run it 15 times.
Who told your teammates to hit Rory?
Well, I don't think Coach did, but I don't think she told them to actually hit her specifically just to do the slide tackle. But every time somebody tackled her, their feet knocked her feet over, which resulted in her being on the ground. So she got knocked down every time.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so she got knocked to the ground every time.
Did you ever see Coach Taylor interact with Rory during the slide tackle drill?
Yeah, the first time she got knocked down, Coach came over and yanked her up and told her to get back to the starting place so she could do it again.
I know this may be hard, but on the 15th teammate hitting Rory. Could you tell us what happened?
Yeah. So that time Rory hit the ground again, but it was a little bit different, and she started to kind of shake and convulse and had some moaning, and it seemed like she was having a seizure. And so then Jess, our trainer, actually like called an ambulance. And then after a while, Rory just stopped moving, and she was actually dead before the ambulance came.
Where was Coach Taylor during all this?
She was on the field.
Thank you, Ms. Saracen. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good evening, Aubrey Saracen. I want to start out by talking about what soccer practice was like on September 7th, 2018.
Okay.
Now, practice started at around 3:15, 3:30 that day.
Right.
That was the normal time your team normally practiced.
It was.
And as you told us, that's because that's when school ended.
Yes. Is that a question?
Well, I was wondering if you could tell me if that was accurate. You started practice right after school ended, right?
Right. That's accurate.
And you were practicing outside
Correct.
on a practice field at Waco High School. Right. That was where normally practices were held.
That's correct.
So there was nothing out of the ordinary about practicing outside.
No,
And on September 7th, it was a hot day,
it was.
over 100 degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Remember, that's typical weather for early September in Waco, right?
Yeah.
And the soccer season for Waco High starts in September.
Practice does, yes.
So you're typically practicing outside in that kind of temperature every year.
Right.
So there was nothing unusual about the weather on September 7th either.
No.
And Coach Taylor had water bottles for all of you at practice.
Right. There was water available.
That's something Coach Taylor always brought to practice.
Yes.
And the Waco High athletic trainer, she was also at practice that day.
She was.
Now, as a part of practice on September 7th, you told us that you were told to go run sprints on Burma Road.
Well, I was told to go do Burma. It's a little bit different than sprinting.
Okay, it includes some running and some dribbling, as you told us, right? Right. And then after a little bit of time, Rory came to do Burma Road with you.
Right.
And now, to be clear, Burma Road isn't actually a road for cars.
No, it's not. It's a little field that's adjacent to the regular practice field.
And you just go there to run a drill for soccer players.
Right.
And it's not unusual for Coach Taylor to ask someone to go do Burma Run.
No, like I said, it's a Waco High tradition.
And Burma Road isn't a drill that only Rory had to do.
No, I was doing it too.
And that's right. And any member of the team could be asked to go do that drill during practice.
Right.
But then there was another drill that Coach Taylor had Rory do that day.
Yes, there was.
The slide tackle drill.
Yes.
And as you told us, for a slide tackle, the point is to get the ball away from the opposing player. Isn't that right?
That's right.
But sometimes when someone does a slide tackle, the legs get caught up together.
More than usually, the person that's kicking the ball also kicks the legs. That's just kind of, they're in the way.
But the purpose of the drill was to practice slide tackles.
Right.
And slide tackles are a regular part of playing soccer.
That's right.
You've used slide tackles before.
Right.
Other players have used them against you.
Sure, a few times.
And in the past, you have practiced slide tackles at practices.
We have, but not with one person dribbling the ball down the field and everyone else tackling.
Got it. So it was never done in this way before, but slide tackles have been practiced.
Right.
So now when you told us that when you talked to Rory, she told you she was feeling funny.
Right.
And that's when she started to do the Burma Road drill.
Correct.
But Rory never told Coach Taylor that she was feeling poorly.
No, she didn't.
She never walked over to the athletic trainer and said she felt sick.
No.
Never asked for a break from anyone.
No, like I said, coach would usually just tell us to suck it up, so she didn't say anything.
She never told Coach Taylor or the athletic trainer that she needed any sort of medical attention.
No.
Now, I want to talk about something you testified to on direct examination. Now, you said that Rory looked pale,
She did.
that she seemed like she was struggling.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, ma'am, is that a yes? Now, the day after Rory's death, you received text messages from one of your friends, Mr. Wooderson.
I think I remember that.
You'd recognize a screenshot of that text message conversation if I showed it to you now.
I think so.
And could you please turn to Exhibit 22 in your exhibit notebook?
Yes.
Just let me know when you're there.
I've got it up.
You recognize the exhibit that's marked as Exhibit 22 in that notebook?
Yes.
And Exhibit 22 is a fair and accurate copy of the text messages you sent and received with Mr. Wooderson?
Yes, that's what my phone looked like.
And to be clear, these text messages were from September 8th, the day after Rory's death?
That's what it says.
Your Honor, at this time, I offer Exhibit 22 into evidence.
Any objections, Mr. Leidig?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 22 is admitted then.
Permission to display that exhibit?
You may.
Ms. Giuseppe, beat me to it. Thank you. And now, Aubrey, are these the text messages we were just talking about?
Yes,
Now, those gray text messages, those are from Mr. Wooderson.
that's correct.
The blue text messages, those are from you.
That's also correct.
So on September 8th, David texted, "Hey, I heard about Rory. What the hell happened?"
Right.
You responded, "Rory just collapsed out of nowhere."
That's what I said.
And then you texted, "It was just so sudden."
Yeah, I didn't really want to talk about it with David, so I just, said that. What I
Well,
thought.
ma'am, I'm sorry, you can finish.
I just mean like it was sudden that she died on the soccer field. It's a shock.
Okay, I understand, ma'am, but in these text messages, you didn't tell Mr. Wooderson that you didn't want to talk about it.
No, but I didn't want to invite more questioning from him, so I just, told him something that would satisfy him.
Okay, but to be clear, you did say it was just so sudden in these text messages.
Right, like I said, it was a shock.
You also said that 1 minute Rory was there, and the next minute she was lying on the ground dying. I still don't really believe it. I read that correctly?
You did. I mean, that's true.
Nowhere in these messages do you say that Coach Taylor treated Rory poorly.
No.
In fact, ma'am, you never mention Coach Taylor's name in these text messages.
No.
Thank you, Ms. Giuseppe. We can take that exhibit down now. No. Aubrey, Rory was one of your best friends.
She was.
You spent a lot of time together.
Yeah, all the time.
You attended the same high school,
We did.
both on the same soccer team.
Yes.
And you spent a lot of time together outside of school.
Yes.
But on September 7th, ma'am, you didn't know that Aubrey had cocaine in her system.
No, I wouldn't have known that.
Rory didn't share that information with you.
No.
You didn't hear Rory tell the athletic trainer that she used cocaine before practice.
Not that I know of.
You didn't hear Rory tell Coach Taylor that she used cocaine before practice?
Not that I know of.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Can you redirect?
No, Your Honor. We ask this witness be excused.
Ms. Saracen, you can step down. Plaintiff, you can call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. So, based upon the trial today, we're no longer calling any live witnesses. However, we would like to read portions of a deposition that's already been taken by Jordan Street, Rory's mother.
Okay.
Your Honor, may my co-counsel come on screen and help me read the answers for these depositions?
Yes, please.
Tyler, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, we're going to read Jordan Street's deposition.
Yes.
Inviting the court's attention to page 3 of Jordan Street's deposition, starting on lines 20 through 24. And then it's going to be page 4, lines 1 through 3. It's a continuous conversation. Question. When did Rory start playing soccer?
Oh gosh, when she was little, 4 or 5 years old. I went and signed her up to get her started with just being out and being athletic and being around other kids. But she took right to it, never looked back. Before you knew it, we were spending weekends driving all over Texas to soccer tournaments. And the next 12 or so years were just kind of a blur. Soccer tournaments, soccer practices, soccer camps, soccer everything.
Inviting the court's attention to page 7 of Ms. Street's deposition, starting on lines 8 through 12. Question. Did Rory regularly visit her pediatrician?
At least once a year for a physical.
Question. During any of those yearly physicals, were there any issues?
None. Rory had never had any serious medical issues, just normal kid stuff.
Inviting the court's attention to page 8, lines 9 through 13. Question. Are slide tackles violent?
They can be. I mean, it's soccer, so a lot of the injuries are pretend acting, but anytime you're running full speed and you slide feet first at another player's legs, that can be a dangerous situation.
Thank you, Tyler. And thank you, Your Honor. This concludes the reading of Jordan Street's deposition.
Mr. Booth, do you have any cross-examination for Ms. Street?
No, Your Honor.
Your Honor, during our case in chief, we'd also like to make use of what has already been entered into evidence as Exhibit 14, the autopsy report. May my co-counsel publish a copy of Exhibit 14, highlighted portions we want to make note to the court?
She may.
Could you post Exhibit? Thank you, Todd. Inviting the court's attention to page 1, the internal examination. An examination of the deceased throat was conducted due to the finding of cocaine during the blood draw and toxicology screen. The deceased throat is not irritated or raw, which would indicate infrequent or first-time use of cocaine. It is not consistent with habitual or repeated use of that drug. An examination of the deceased brain revealed cerebral edema. Additionally, there were signs of muscle breakdown in various parts of the deceased body. Your Honor, we also have copies of the expert report, which has already been entered into evidence as Exhibit 16. May we read portions from those documents for the court?
You may.
And may my co-counsel publish the Exhibit 16 for the screen?
You may.
Inviting the court's attention to page 2 of Exhibit 16, starting with the last paragraph. Aubrey Saracen described Rory Street as playing sloppy on the day in question. Once Rory Street was running Burma Road, Aubrey Saracen described her as really struggling and unusually pale. According to Aubrey Saracen, at that point, Rory Street said that she was feeling funny and complained of chest pain. Moments later, when Coach Taylor had Rory line up for the slide tackling drill, Aubrey Saracen described Rory as really pale, like lifeless almost, hands on her hips, and breathing heavy. Finally, after the 15th slide tackle, Aubrey Saracen described Rory lying on the ground, groaning and convulsing. These symptoms are consistent with heat exhaustion and or heat stroke. Rory Street's pale skin, apparent weakness, potential dizziness, which is indicated by the fact that she felt funny and fell down on multiple occasions, fatigue, which is again indicated by the continually falling down and struggling, potential abdominal pain, which is indicated by the groaning, and a rapid heartbeat, which is indicated by the chest pain, are all symptoms that are commonly associated with heat exhaustion and or heat stroke. Additionally, the description of Rory lying on the ground and convulsing is consistent with a seizure, which is a sign of heat stroke. Additionally, there are several findings in the autopsy report that are consistent with heat exhaustion and or heat stroke. First, the autopsy report indicates that Rory Street had cerebral edema. Cerebral edema is when fluid builds up around the brain, causing an increase in pressure, known as intracranial pressure, which then leads to swelling and inflammation of the brain. Cerebral edema is often caused by and is completely consistent with heat exhaustion and or heat stroke. Also, the finding of muscle breakdown is also consistent with heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Your Honor, this concludes our reading of the exhibit. And with that, the plaintiff rests the case in chief.
Your Honor, I think you might be.
Gotcha. I'll learn Zoom at one point in time. Do you have anything we need to take up before I tally up the time and we move on to the defense's case in chief?
No, Your Honor, we're ready to proceed.
All right, then we will take a 2-minute break. I will tally up the time you have used, and then we will start back at 5:18 with the defense's case in chief.
Thank you.
All right, are both parties back and ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
Plaintiff, you have 35 minutes and 9 seconds remaining. Defense, you have 39:27 remaining. Mr. Booth, you can start with your case in chief whenever you're ready.
Defense calls Reese Taylor. May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Good evening. Could you please introduce yourself?
I'm Reese Taylor.
How old are you, Miss Taylor?
I'm 48.
And where do you live?
I live right here in Waco, Texas.
How long have you lived in Waco?
All my life, I was born and raised here, and I live here today. So forever, basically.
What do you do in Waco, Miss Taylor?
I'm currently a teacher and coach at Waco High School. I teach health and I coach the women's soccer team.
How long have you worked in that capacity at Waco High?
Well, I've been at Waco High for about 6 or 7 years now, but I have been a teacher and a coach for over 25 years.
No, what sports do you teach at Waco High?
Well, as a high school coach, I've helped out with a lot. I've done some work with the softball team, the basketball team, volleyball, track. I mean, you name it. I've probably helped coach, but like I said, my main focus has been soccer.
Do you have any formal training in coaching?
Well, I have my degree in physical education from A&M, and I also I attend clinics and things just to make sure I keep my knowledge fresh so that I'm being the best coach that I can be.
And Miss Taylor, you said you got your degree. What degree was that?
In physical education, a PE degree.
Now, Miss Taylor, we've heard a lot about Rory Street today. How do you know Rory?
She was on my soccer team back in 17, 18, around that time.
Do you remember when Rory passed away?
Yes, it was at the beginning of our 2018 season. I believe it was September 7th of 2018.
Were you with Rory that day?
Yes.
Why?
We had practice that afternoon, as we usually did after school let out. We had practice that day.
What time did practice start?
It was around 3:15 or 3:30.
And did you have a specific plan for practice that day?
Yes, I believe that day we were planning on doing a full-on scrimmage simulation, getting ready for games. And when everyone was ready for practice, that's what we started doing.
So you started doing that at around 3:15, 3:30. Did anything happen to alter your plan?
Yes.
What?
Well, we were getting into the scrimmage, and I just realized that Rory just wasn't playing like she usually did. She wasn't performing. She just seemed to be goofing off and not doing, what we need our leaders and our players to be doing in practice. And so I just kind of switched up the plan from that point.
Could you give us some examples of how Rory was acting?
Yeah, she just kept getting out of position. She was missing passes. She was missing open goals, and she didn't seem focused at all. It was just very out of character for her.
So when you saw this behavior from Rory, what did you do?
Well, I was just kind of frustrated. Like I said, she's a leader. We need her to be on her game. And so just to kind of help her get her head into practice, I sent her over to run a few times through Burma Road.
Now, we've already heard a little bit about that drill, Burma Road, but could you describe what that drill is?
Yes, I mean, it's a Waco High tradition. It's been around for years. Basically, all you do is you start on the end line, you sprint 30 yards. There's a soccer ball, you dribble the ball for 30 yards, and you shoot an open goal. And then once you shoot the goal, you bear crawl back to the starting point, and you do it all over again.
And so you told us that on September 7th, you asked Rory to do that drill?
I did, yes.
Ms. Taylor, were you in court today when Ms. Aubrey Sarenson testified?
I was, yes.
Did you hear Ms. Saracen say that you instructed Rory to run until she passed out?
Yes, I believe she said that.
Did you ever tell Rory to run until she passed out?
No, I never said that.
Ms. Taylor, I want to pause here for a moment. When you asked Rory to go run Burma Road, did you think that that would endanger her health?
No, not at all.
And at that time, did you notice anything about her physical appearance that seemed unusual to you?
No, I mean, she was sweating just as much as anyone else, but there was nothing about her appearance that would have made me believe that something was wrong with her.
Now, at this time in practice, before she ran this drill, did Rory ask you for a break?
No.
Did she say she was feeling poorly?
No.
So what happened when you told Rory to go run that drill?
Well, she went over and started running, and from where I was standing, I was just kind of keeping an eye on her, and I noticed that she still seemed to be goofing off and just didn't seem to be taking it seriously, and that's just really frustrating. And so I had her stop, and then we engaged in another drill.
Miss Taylor, where were practices held on September 7th?
We have a practice field.
Is that where those practices were?
Yes.
And when you told Rory to go run Burma Road, could you see her the whole time she was doing that exercise?
I could, yes.
How far away were you from her at that time?
Maybe only 20 to 30 yards.
Would you recognize a photograph of the field you practiced on that day if I showed it to you now?
Yes.
Ms. Taylor, could you please turn to Exhibit 2 in your exhibit notebook and let me know when you get there.
Okay, I have it pulled up.
Do you recognize the document marked as Exhibit 2 in your notebook?
Yes.
What is it?
It's an aerial view of the practice field and the space where we would just conduct our normal soccer practices.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of those fields as you understand them?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to enter this Exhibit 2 into evidence?
Any objection?
No objections to Exhibit 2, Your Honor.
Exhibit 2 is admitted.
And permission to publish that exhibit?
You may.
Ms. Taylor, can you tell us what we're looking at in this photograph?
Yes, the blue outline indicates the normal full practice field, and the red outline is just an extra space that we had off to the side that was used for other drills, namely Burma Road.
So, Ms. Taylor, you told us that you were about 20 yards from Rory while she was completing that drill. What box were you standing in?
The blue one. I was standing more on the sideline of the blue box, in between the blue and the red.
And what box was Rory in while she was completing that drill?
She was in the red box.
Ms. DiGiuseppe, we can take that image down now. Thank you. What did you do after you saw Rory continue to goof around?
Well, like I said, I stopped her and I brought her back over to the main field where the rest of the team was, because I just thought that if Burma Road wasn't going to get through to her, we were going to have to try another drill so that, you know, she would get it together and be present for practice like we needed her to be.
And did you have Rory do another drill?
Yes.
Could you describe that drill to us?
Yes, it was a slide tackling drill where Rory was standing by herself and the rest of the team was lined up single file facing her some distance away. And Rory would dribble forward and a corresponding player would run at her and practice a slide tackle to try to steal the ball from her.
Now, why did you ask Rory to do that drill specifically?
Well, I just thought that that would be the best way to really get her attention. I mean, we do a lot of slide tackling drills generally, but I wanted to get through to her specifically that, you know, she needed to change her act, that practice. And I thought that would be the best way.
And then you said that you've done slide tackle drills before, but have you ever done this specific drill before?
No, this was newer. We'd never done it before.
Ms. Taylor, I want to pause again. Before you started this drill, did Rory ever ask you for a break?
No.
Did she ever tell you that she was feeling poorly?
No.
And ma'am, when you thought up this drill and asked Rory to participate in it, did you think it would endanger her health?
No, I never would have thought that would have happened.
So what happened once the drill started?
Well, we just went through a few of our players, and after we got through a number of them, that's when Rory collapsed on the field.
No, do you remember Miss Saracen testifying that during this drill, you grabbed Rory and pulled her to her feet?
Yes, I heard that.
Miss Taylor, did you do that?
No, I did not do that.
So how did the drill end? I think you just told us that Rory collapsed.
Yes.
How long was it into the drill that happened?
Like I said, I think we had gone through about 14 or 15 players practicing their slide tackle against her when she collapsed.
So what happened to Rory after she collapsed?
She started kind of convulsing, I guess, and just shaking, and obviously something was very wrong at that point, and then she just never got back up.
Did someone call an ambulance?
Yes.
When you saw this happen to Rory, how did you react?
I was shocked. I never thought something like this could happen.
Ms. Taylor, do you take any steps to keep your student athletes safe?
Yes.
What steps in particular do you take?
Well, really there are three main measures just because it's so important to keep all of our players safe. I mean, we have water at every practice. We have frequent breaks, and even outside of those breaks, the athletes can ask to get a drink if they need to. But most importantly, we have a trainer present at every practice, and it's so helpful to have another set of eyes, and especially someone who's more knowledgeable of any medical issue that might come up out there every day. And she just helps keep an eye on all the players to make sure that everyone is staying properly hydrated and as safe as possible.
And Ms. Taylor, what is that trainer's name?
Her name is Jess Merriweather.
At any time on September 7th, did Rory go talk to Miss Merriweather?
No, not that I saw.
Before Rory collapsed at the end of that drill, did you have any reason to believe that she wasn't feeling well?
No.
Did you have any reason to believe that she may have ingested drugs before coming to practice?
No. No reason at all.
Ma'am, would you allow a student to attend and participate in practice if they were under the influence of an illegal drug?
I would never allow that to happen.
Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon, Ms. Taylor. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I want to talk to you about your career as a soccer coach. You've been doing it for some time, right?
Yes, soccer specifically a little over 20 years, but coaching in total over 25 years.
Exactly. You like coaching. I think that's fair to say.
I love it.
You love it because you love the sport.
I do.
You love working with young adults, right?
Yes.
You love working with them so much, you actually consider them like your children.
Yes.
You know it's important to be a good coach, right?
Yes.
Be a coach that's aware of how to play the game properly.
Yes.
But also a coach that knows how to take care of their players.
Yes.
To keep them safe from harm.
Correct.
From injury.
Yes.
From unnecessary risk.
Right.
And currently, you actually keep up to date with trainings, right?
I do, yes.
You go to coach clinics a good bit?
Yes, pretty frequently.
A couple times a year, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
I'm sorry, yes.
And you go to these coach clinics so you can keep up with the best and latest with coaching, right?
That's correct.
You went to a coaching seminar in June 15th of 2018, right?
That sounds correct.
And you remember that, right?
I do.
And during that seminar, they talked to you about two major things. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, I believe so.
They talked to you about heat.
Yes.
They talked to you about slide tackles.
Yes.
Now, this was from the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association, right?
That's correct.
And they laid out various guidelines for how many breaks you should provide. True?
Yes.
Breaks of when the heat is between 96 to 99?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor. Now, this is crossing over into hearsay.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
Your Honor, we're not offering these statements for the truth of the matter, sir, but rather to establish Coach Taylor's knowledge and duty, as well as her credibility of being a coach. I mean, we heard her today talk about how she wants to protect her students and how she goes to these different clinics to make sure she has the best and latest up-to-date coaching techniques.
Overruled. You can continue.
Your Honor, if I may just ask for a limiting instruction that these statements aren't being offered for the truth and instead are going for that specific purpose.
Yes, granted. The record will reflect that this is not being offered for the truth, but for the limited purposes that we just stated.
Coach, if I showed you a copy of those, you'd recognize it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see Exhibit 11 in your exhibit notebook?
Yes.
And these were the slides we were just talking about, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, we offer what has been marked for identification as Exhibit 11 into evidence as Exhibit 11, with the limiting instruction that they are not being offered for the truth, but rather to establish coach's knowledge.
Mr. Booth, with that limiting instruction, do you have any objection?
No, Your Honor, not if that limiting instruction is in place.
Then exhibit, you said it was 11?
Yes, Your Honor.
Exhibit 11 is admitted.
Now, Ms. Taylor, or I'm sorry, Tyler, could you bring up the second page of Exhibit 11, please? And
Yes.
Your Honor, may Tyler, oh, there we go. Is that okay, Your Honor, if we publish this?
She can publish it.
Okay, thank you. You see that okay, Ms. Taylor?
Yes.
Now, you see that where it talks about the temperature reaching between 96 and 99 degrees?
Yes.
That the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association states that 5-minute breaks should be given every 30 minutes of practice, right?
That's correct.
The practice should not exceed 2 hours of total outdoor playing time.
That's correct.
And also at the bottom, it talks about what happens when the temperature reaches above 100 degrees.
Yes.
You should give those breaks every 15 minutes.
Yes.
And that water must always be available, right?
Yes.
You'd agree with me, these are pretty common sense, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's common sense that when it's hot out, you have to give your players breaks.
Yes.
When it's hot out, you got to provide them water.
Yes.
When it's hot out, you have to make sure that your players are okay.
Absolutely.
Tyler, could you flip to the third page, please? This slide's all about slide tackles, right?
Yes.
Now, you testified in direct examination that slide tackles are a part of the game of soccer, right?
That's correct.
They're a dangerous part of the game of soccer, aren't they?
They can be.
You'd agree with me that the slide that you used for the latest and best coaching techniques classifies as a slide tackle can cause a serious injury to an opponent, right?
Yes, they can.
Or even the player themselves who's actually doing the slide tackle, right?
Yes.
And to be clear, you ordered your players to do slide tackles when you were coach, right?
Yeah, we do a lot of slide tackling drills to make sure that the players know how to do them correctly or as safely as possible.
Tyler, could you take down that exhibit, please? Thank you. Now, Ms. Taylor, I want to talk to you about 2018. That was a pretty good year for you, right?
Yes.
You had just got done winning 5 of the previous 6 district champions.
Yes.
You were state semifinalists,
Yes.
but you weren't state champions, right?
No.
And 2018 was your year to become a state champ, true?
It could have been.
Well, that was your goal, right?
I mean, that's the goal every year. Yes.
Right.
So
And
that's fair.
as a good coach, you always want to know that you're meeting your goals, right?
Yes.
And so I want to talk to you about September 7th of 2018. You started practice around 3:15 to 3:30, right?
Yes.
It was pretty hot that day, wasn't it?
Yes.
But before going to practice, you never checked the temperature, right?
I don't recall doing so.
You don't have a specific recollection if it was in the 96 to 99 range?
I don't specifically remember.
You don't specifically remember because you didn't bother to check, did you?
I mean, I don't recall checking that day.
Regardless, you called practice, and there's a reason why you called practice at 3:30 or 3:15 to 3:30, right, Coach?
Yes.
For conditioning.
Well, and that's when the kids get out of school too. So yes, it's great for conditioning purposes, but we can't very well practice in the middle of the day because the students are in class. So naturally, 3:15 is the best time for us to have practice because that's immediately when they get out of class.
Wasn't it true you stated in your deposition that you prefer to do practice around 3:15 to 3:30 because of the heat?
Yes, I did say that, but as Ms. Sarenson also testified earlier, that is when all the students that's when they get out of class. And so it's a secondary reason, but yes, conditioning benefits are also great for holding practice at that time.
And to be clear, Ms. Taylor, you never talked about class schedules in your deposition prior to coming today, right?
No, correct.
This is the first time you're testifying to anything about class schedules in your soccer schedule, right?
Yeah.
So when you called practice that day on 3:30, it was extremely hot, wasn't it?
It was pretty hot, yeah.
You're now aware that it was above 100 degrees,
Yes.
almost reaching 105 degrees.
Yes, I believe so.
And during that practice, you never ordered a break, did you?
I don't specifically recall.
You don't specifically recall asking any of those teammates to take a break, true?
That's correct. I don't recall.
But you recall seeing Rory, right?
Yes.
And you were pretty displeased with Rory, weren't you?
Yes.
You were displeased because you thought she was goofing around.
Yes.
This isn't typical for Rory, is it?
No, she's usually pretty focused and driven and a leader for the team.
Exactly. She was a leader for the team. So when she wasn't doing that, you would agree with me, you thought something was wrong.
Yeah, her behavior it seemed out of the ordinary.
Exactly. Out of the ordinary. And when you saw that something was out of the ordinary, you didn't ask her how she was feeling. Did you?
No. It seemed like she was goofing around to me. It didn't seem like something was physically wrong with her.
You didn't tell her to take a break?
No.
You wanted to punish her.
I wanted her to get her head in practice.
So that's a yes to my question. You wanted to punish her for her goofing around.
I mean, I guess that's true on some level, but she just needed to focus.
So you sent her to run Burma Road, right?
I did, yes.
You can't tell us exactly how many runs Rory made?
No, I don't think she was doing it for very long, but I can't tell you a specific number.
You can't tell us how many minutes you had her running Burma Road in that hot sun, can you, Coach?
No.
But you can tell us when you called her over, right?
Yes.
You called Rory over because you thought she was goofing around again, right?
Yes.
You wanted to discipline her, right?
Yeah, I mean, I needed her to do what she usually does. I needed her to focus. So yes,
So is that a yes to my question? You were disciplining her when you called her over?
yes.
Because earlier you were calling the drill or the slide tackle a drill. You
Well,
remember testifying to that?
Yes, it is a drill.
Right, but the way you were using this drill, it was a discipline. True?
Yes, on some level, but it was also practice for the rest of the girls.
Well, you knew why you chose the slide tackle drill, right?
What do you mean? I'm sorry, what do you mean?
Well, you stated in deposition why you chose the slide tackle drill to use against Rory. You remember testifying to that?
Yes, I believe so.
You testified in your deposition that you chose the slide tackle drill because it was a hard tackle
Yes.
with lots of physical contact.
Yes.
And you needed to show Rory that her attitude and effort wasn't appreciated.
Objection, Your Honor. At this point, those are 3 statements in a row that were from this witness's deposition. Those are out-of-court statements, and therefore this is hearsay.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Response, Mr. Leidig?
Yes, Your Honor. They are being used to impeach the witness earlier through not only Mr. Booth's opening statement, as well as not only through Mr. Booth's opening statement, but through the direct examination constantly. Both Coach Taylor and Mr. Booth called this a drill, as in it was some sort of reasonable action, that it was just a slide tackle drill. But in Coach Taylor's deposition, she used it as a discipline, to discipline Rory for her attitude and effort.
Your Honor, if I could respond briefly to that.
You may.
This witness just a moment ago said, yes, it was discipline. And yes, the form of that discipline was a drill. There's absolutely no inconsistency here. And so opposing counsel doesn't have the right to read out court statements for that purpose.
I'm going to sustain the objection. I don't think we're at the stage where we need to impeach the witness on this. However, if you feel that you need to impeach her later on, if she continues to, in your case, in your opinion, to be inconsistent with her previous statement, then feel free to impeach her.
Yes, Your Honor. So a part of this discipline was putting Rory on one end of the field, right?
Yes,
And then 10 yards away, you lined your teammates up, right?
correct.
And you had each one slide tackle Rory.
Yes,
You saw Rory fall to the ground.
yes,
And this happened 15 times, right?
roughly, yes.
And on the 15th time Rory fell to the ground, she didn't get back up, did she?
No.
She laid on your field?
Yeah.
That's where she died.
Yes,
Right after you blew that whistle for her teammate to slide tackle her, right?
yes.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect, Mr. Booth?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Miss Taylor, you were just asked about a time when you said that you noticed was something was out of the ordinary with Rory. Did you mean that you noticed something physically wrong with her?
No.
What did you notice that was out of the ordinary?
I noticed that her behavior and her attitude were not like they normally are. Like I said, she seemed like she was goofing off and not taking practice seriously. Nothing in what she was doing made me think that she was physically unwell.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Coach Taylor, then I believe you can step down. Mr. Booth, call your next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, we would like to read in portions of deposition testimony from an unavailable witness, Miss Jess Merriweather. May my second chair, Miss DiGiuseppe, turn on her video to answer the questions as I ask them?
Yes, please.
And for the record, I did speak to opposing counsel before trial and tell him exactly what lines we will be looking at. I will also let you know as we go along.
Thank you.
Starting on page 2, lines 6 through 20. Good morning. Would you please state your name for the record?
Hello there. My name is Jess Merriweather.
How old are you, Jess?
I am 28 years old.
Where do you live?
I live in Waco, Texas.
How long have you lived in Waco?
Just a couple of years now. I grew up in Houston. Then I went to Texas A&M for undergrad. And then I got a master's degree in sports training from A&M as well. After that, I worked for a couple of years at another high school in College Station before I got the job at Waco High.
And what is your job at Waco High?
I am an athletic trainer and I also teach health.
Directing court and counsel to page 3, lines 13 through 18. Did you do any athletic training while you were at A&M?
That was the whole point of the program. I worked with football players, track athletes, basketball players, and more while completing my master's degree in sports training. So it isn't like the job at Waco High was the first time that I've ever done athletic training.
Directing court and counsel to page 8, lines 8 through 9. Were you at practice the day Rory died?
I was.
Jumping down to lines 18 to 24, also on page 8. At any time, did you see Rory stumbling, faltering, or slowing down in a way that would have indicated she was in trouble?
No, not at all.
Was Rory sweating hard?
I mean, yes, but everyone was, including me. It was a really hot day.
Directing court and counsel to page 9, lines 9 through 11. Are players allowed to get water when they want it?
Yes. All they have to do is ask, even if we're not on a water break.
Your Honor, that concludes all of the testimony we'll be eliciting from that deposition.
Mr. Leidy, do you have any cross-examination that you'd like to read into the record from Jess Merriweather's deposition?
Yes, Your Honor, I do. May my co-counsel come on screen and help me?
Yes.
I'm going to read the portions opposing counsel had left out on page 8, starting with lines 10 through 17. Question. You see where I'm at, Tyler?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Question. Did you see Rory running Burma Road?
I saw Rory over on Burma Road, but I wasn't watching her closely.
Question. Did you see Rory during the slide tackling drill?
Again, I saw that it was happening, and I certainly saw parts of it, but I didn't watch it closely.
Question. What were you doing while all of this was going on?
I was taping another student's ankle about 40 yards away.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Your Honor. This concludes our reading of Jess Merriweather's deposition.
All right, anything further from the defense?
No further witnesses, Your Honor, but at this time, I'd ask permission to display and read portions onto the record from 3 exhibits. And all of these exhibits, well, actually, the first 2 of these exhibits are already in evidence, and the third one I'll offer at that time.
Very well.
First, Your Honor, directing you to Exhibit 15, the toxicology report for Rory Street. And permission to display that document.
Yes, you may.
For the record, Your Honor, we would like to note that on September 8th, 2018, at 1930 hours, a blood sample was taken from the body of Rory Street and sent for a toxicology screening. The results of that screening showed that Rory Street tested positive for 60 nanograms per milliliter of cocaine. Ms. DiGiuseppe, you can take that down now. Permission to display Exhibit 18. That's the report from our expert toxicologist.
You may.
Ms. DiGiuseppe, thank you. Can we go to page 2? And it says in this document, here is the opinion I have reached in this case. Based on a reasonable degree of professional and or medical certainty, Rory Street's death was caused, at least in part, by the use of cocaine.
Oh shit. Did my AirPod die or something?
Oh, hold up for a second. Are my judges there?
Yes, Dan.
Alex is here.
James is here.
Brad is here.
Okay. TJ, Brenna, Daniel?
Jay's here.
Brenna's here. Dan and Jordan?
Dan is here.
I'm here.
We had some sort of weird moment there. All right, continue with your reading, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Here is the opinion that I reached in this case. Based on a reasonable degree of professional and or medical certainty, Rory Street's death was caused, at least in part, by the use of cocaine. Cocaine use can ultimately lead to cardiac arrhythmia, heart attacks, cerebral hemorrhage or stroke, and heart failure. Additionally, cocaine use can induce hyperthermia, which lowers the threshold for heat stroke because it inhibits the body's natural cooling process by causing vasoconstriction in the extremities, which keeps most of the blood supply internal. This impairs the body's natural cooling because natural cooling happens when the blood is cooled by going to the skin. Cocaine keeps blood from going to the skin by constricting blood vessels. And you can, thank you, Ms. DiGiuseppe. And Your Honor, the final document I'd like to read from is Exhibit 20, It is a learned treatise, and by stipulation, it has been deemed to be a learned treatise under that hearsay exception. I'd like to read one paragraph from that document.
Any objections to note for the record, Mr. Leidig?
No objections to learned treatise. I just asked the foundation as to what opposing counsel will be reading.
Yes, one moment. And Your Honor, is it okay if we display that portion so that opposing counsel can see what we're referring to?
Yes.
Sam, can we look at that? Mr. Leidig, this is in that document if you want to take a second and look at it.
Okay, thank you.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
All right. Was that all you had to say, Mr. Leidig?
Yes, Your Honor, we have no objections.
Then it's admitted and you can proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Heat, exertion, and recreational drug use can work together to increase the risk of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. For example, cocaine use can result in hyperthermia, which inhibits the body's natural cooling process by constricting the blood vessels, clamping down on blood flow, and preventing blood from reaching the skin where it can be cooled. Thus, if cocaine use is combined with overexertion in extremely hot conditions, then it would only serve to exacerbate the risks associated with heat exhaustion and heat stroke, and could lead to a cascade of symptoms associated with heat exhaustion and heat stroke. And with that, Your Honor, we rest our case in chief and we're ready to proceed to closing arguments.
All right. Anything we need to take up before we move to closing arguments and I tally the time up? Nothing for me to decide?
No, Your Honor.
I'm just ready to proceed.
All right, then we will start closing arguments at 6 o'clock, and I will have an update for you on your remaining time at that time as well.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Okay, are both parties ready to proceed with closings?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
For the plaintiff, you have 22 minutes, 12 seconds remaining.
Okay.
For the defense, 1906. Mr. Leidig, you can proceed with your closing argument whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. But before I begin, may I request my remaining time for rebuttal? I don't intend to use all 22 minutes in this, though.
Yes, granted.
And may it please the court. Good afternoon, Your Honor. Today, after all the evidence was considered, all the testimony was heard, we saw how far a high school coach was willing to go to make sure that she's known as the best coach in the county. We saw all the times that she risked students' lives, all the times that she punished students, all the corners she was willing to cut, and what it cost in the end. Your Honor, unfortunately, it didn't cost Coach Taylor anything besides a day in court, because what it really cost was a young 18-year-old's life. Miss Rory Street, who will never again play soccer because she died on Coach Taylor's field. Now, we as the plaintiff hold the burden of proof in today's case. It was proved to you by a greater weight of the evidence that the defendant, Reese Taylor, is liable for Rory Street's death. And we've met our burden today. We've proven to you by preponderance of the evidence that Coach Taylor is in fact liable for Rory Street's death because of what happened before, during, and after Coach Taylor lost her temper. Now, at the beginning of this trial, Mr. Booth came before you and told you that this came out of nowhere, that no one could have predicted this storm to roll in and take Rory away. But Your Honor, with the facts that we saw today, with the testimony and the evidence that we all got to see, this was as foreseeable as it was preventable. all that it took was for Coach Taylor to put student safety above her own personal achievement record. And because she decided to put her record above student safety, we're in the situation we're in today. I'd like to talk about what happened before Coach lost her temper. And we heard about what happened at typical practices. We heard that typically there were breaks, that typically we were allowed, or the students were allowed to get water, that typically they were cared for more. But suddenly on September 7th of 2018, well, Coach Taylor can't tell you how many breaks were taken that day. Coach Taylor can't tell you how much water was given to the students. On the day that it mattered the most, in the day in question, Coach Taylor can't tell you about all that training that she received as a soccer coach. And keep in mind that on the record, Reese Taylor told this court how important that training was. How important it was to stay with the best and latest coaching techniques. Techniques that she classified herself as common sense. It was common sense to give players breaks, especially in the heat, and especially when the heat is above 100 degrees like it was on September 7th of 2018. And in the light of that common sense that Coach Taylor said that she saw, she didn't apply any of her common sense. It's problematic, Your Honor. It's problematic because it was foreseeable. And because it's foreseeable, Coach Taylor is liable. But Your Honor, it doesn't stop there. For during practice, Coach Taylor saw Rory, a star athlete, someone who was a leader on the team. As she came before and told you today, something was off. Something was different. Rory was goofing around, if we want to believe her story. But in the light of Rory acting differently, something that Coach Taylor had never seen before, well, she didn't ask how Rory was feeling. She didn't ask if Rory needed water. She didn't apply that common sense and give her a break. No, she punched her. And as much as we want to call it a drill or we want to call it tradition, tradition doesn't excuse torture. When it's Waco and it's 105 degrees out and you're making your students run. Not run 30 yards and stop, not run and dribble a ball, run until you pass out. That's what Aubrey Saracen heard when she watched her friend join her on the run. But it's not what she heard that it's alarming. It's what she saw. Because as Rory came into view for Aubrey, she saw what Rory looked like. Rory was pale. Rory complained of chest pains. Rory complained that she felt funny. And at that point, Aubrey had the opportunity to tell Coach Taylor, opportunity to tell the trainer, but we heard why Aubrey kept her mouth shut. And we heard why because they were scared of the coach. That any time any of the students complained in the past, well, Coach Taylor didn't take any excuses. Your Honor, if Coach Taylor doesn't take any excuses in her job, then Coach Taylor doesn't get to make excuses in front of you, in front of this court. But that's exactly what Coach Taylor, as well as the defense counsel, tried to do when they said that Aubrey should have reported it. It doesn't make sense. But unfortunately for Rory, the torture didn't stop there because Coach Taylor needed to cook something up. Something to show Rory that her attitude and effort wasn't appreciated. And so she got an idea. Let's take a slide tackle drill. A slide tackle drill that's a fundamental part of the game, sure, but something that can cause serious injury to both the players that are doing it and the players that are getting slide tackle. Something that we can get the whole team in on. And so she took Rory, marched her to the middle of the field, and 10 yards away stood 15 of her teammates, lined as Coach Taylor's own personal hit squad, with one goal and one goal in mind: to charge Rory and to slide tackle her. And the defendant watched as one after another hit Rory, caused Rory to fall to the ground. It's not where it stops, though. It doesn't stop there because Coach Taylor needed to make sure discipline, to make sure law and order were upheld on her soccer field. So when Rory couldn't get to her feet, she walked towards Rory, and without saying a word or commenting on Rory's pale skin, she grabbed a hold of her jersey and pulled her to her feet, took 3 steps back, and blew that whistle, and sent another player to slide tackle Rory until the defendant couldn't blow the whistle anymore because Rory wasn't getting up. Because in that last time, that 15th time, Rory lay on that soccer field, the defendant's soccer field, where she died. Now, opposing counsel wants us to believe that this was caused all by cocaine. That cocaine is the true culprit in today's case, but Your Honor, that's not necessarily the full picture. Because yes, while there was cocaine recovered in Rory's system, we also have the facts that Coach Taylor wasn't taking no for an answer. And when it came to laying down discipline, Coach Taylor got creative. And when the coach gets creative, fortunately, Rory had to die. Your Honor, please don't take my words as anything but this. I'm not saying that the defendant intentionally wanted Rory to die, but through the foreseeable actions that Coach Taylor took on September 7th of 2018, it was foreseeable that Rory was not in good shape before Coach lost her temper. It was foreseeable that Rory wasn't in great shape while Coach lost her temper. And as Rory lay on that field, right before that 15th player would charge Rory, slide tackle Rory, and seal Rory's fate, it was foreseeable that all of these actions in the Waco heat, in the middle of the dog days of summer in September, would lead to someone losing their life. Especially with the lack of brakes, with the lack of water, with the lack of care. And that's alarming, Your Honor. That's alarming because Coach Taylor had a duty to protect her students, someone that she calls her own children, but she doesn't give that care when she loses her temper. Her temper that she loses with Aubrey Saracen to run in the hot heat, and the temper she lost when she sealed Rory's fate. And we saw some medical opinions in today's case, and we saw where the symptoms that Aubrey Saracen observed were consistent with heat exhaustion and heat stroke. And with the facts and the evidence we have in front of us in today's case, it makes sense that Rory passed because of heat stroke. That she was out on that field being slide tackled, slamming to the ground, and all because one person ordered these tackles. And that's the defendant, Coach Taylor. And because the defendant ordered those tackles, and because the defendant ignored the risk, and because the defendant ignored Rory laying on the ground, well, that's why the defendant is liable. And Your Honor, with the facts and evidence in today's case, we ask that you find Reese Taylor liable for the death of 18-year-old Rory Street. Thank you.
Mr. Booth, closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
May.
May it please the court, counsel? No one could have seen this coming. Not Coach Taylor, not Miss Aubrey Saracen, and not anyone else that we've heard from today. And that's because none of them knew that Rory ingested cocaine sometime before practice on September 7th. They had no way of knowing that that mixture of cocaine, the heat, and physical exertion was putting dangerous levels of stress on Rory's heart. And because no one knew, no one was able to stop it. By the time Coach Taylor, Miss Merriweather, any of the other people at that practice knew that something was wrong with Rory, it was too late. And today, the plaintiff has brought a wrongful death suit against Miss Taylor, and therefore they have the burden of proving their case to you. They had to prove that Miss Taylor acted negligently towards Rory Street back on September 7th of 2018, and that those negligent acts caused Rory Street's death. Now, on top of that, they also needed to prove to you that Rory's death was a foreseeable result of Coach Taylor's actions. If they can't prove that, then Miss Taylor cannot be held liable. Now, there are two key facts that demonstrate why the plaintiff failed to meet their burden today. First, September 7th was a soccer practice just like any other soccer practice. It was normal. And second, Miss Taylor had no way of knowing that Rory was going to die during practice. Let's talk about why those facts are so important. Fact number one, September 7th was just a normal practice for the Waco varsity soccer team. You heard that they practiced at the same time on the same field that they always did. It was hot, but water was available for every player. A trainer was present, and it was her job to keep an eye on the students and be a resource for them. This practice was just like any other practice. But the plaintiff has pointed to the drills that were run that day, and they said they were unreasonable, and Your Honor, and then opposing counsel just said something that honestly, I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't just heard it. Because the first drill that day that Rory ran, it was Burma Road. And opposing counsel just referred to that drill as torture. Torture. And I want to be clear about what he thinks torture is, because running Burma Road is essentially just sprints. You ask one of the players to go and run for a certain period of distance. You ask him to run with the ball, and then you ask him to make a shot and crawl back to the beginning. Sure, it's a tough drill, but anyone who's played high school sports knows that's just how it goes. When you goof off, you go run sprints, and no one, except opposing counsel, would call that torture. There's nothing unreasonable about it. It's just a part of being an athlete, and it's something they've been doing at Waco High without incident since Coach Taylor was there. Coach Taylor ran that drill. But opposing counsel called the next drill they ran torture as well. He said that this slide tackle drill was a huge problem, that it was dangerous. And I agree with opposing counsel. Slide tackles can be dangerous if done incorrectly. Coach Taylor testified to that today. But that's why you have to practice them. Because if you get into a game and you don't know how to use a slide tackle, but you do it anyway, that's very dangerous. But let's be clear about why it's dangerous. Because opposing counsel spent a lot of time telling you that slide tackles are dangerous, but then they didn't actually tell you what kind of damage they could cause. When a player runs into the legs of another player, you could sprain your ankle. You could break a leg if it's really bad, maybe take a bad fall. But you heard no evidence today that slide tackles suddenly cause heart failure. And you didn't hear that evidence because no one would be willing to say that. What you did see was the autopsy report. That said that Rory had no physical wounds on her body whatsoever. No cuts, no bruises, no scrapes. So when opposing counsel talks about how bad those 15 slide tackles were, well, they can't have been as brutal as he describes because there was no impact. There was no mark left to show that, to show the kind of wounds you would expect. More importantly, you've just not seen any evidence that slide tackles have any causal link at all to the injuries that Rory suffered that day. They're not connected. Now, I want to address two of the allegations you heard from Aubrey Saracen today. Now, Aubrey told you that Miss Taylor told Rory to run until she passed out, and that Miss Taylor grabbed Rory by her jersey and yanked her to her feet. But that doesn't mean that Your Honor has to accept that as true, because you alone in this case get to determine the credibility of the witnesses. And Your Honor, Aubrey Saracen is a biased witness. She was best friends with Rory. They grew up together. They spent a lot of time with each other's families. And that bias is something, Your Honor, should weigh heavily in determining Miss Saracen's credibility, especially when we know that Miss Saracen has made inconsistent statements. Now today, when Miss Saracen was on the stand, she described Rory's symptoms as being severe and obvious. But then I asked her about some text messages that she received and sent just the day afterwards. What she said in those text messages was that Rory's death was sudden. It happened out of nowhere. And Your Honor, she didn't even mention Miss Taylor in these text messages. And Your Honor, what that tells us is that when she took the stand today, she was exaggerating. Ms. DiGiuseppe, we can take those down now. And Your Honor, if Miss Saracen was willing to exaggerate about the symptoms she saw that day, what else did she exaggerate? You cannot trust Aubrey's recollection of practice when there is proof, concrete proof, that she exaggerated under oath. Especially when you heard from Coach Taylor that she never told Rory to run until she passed out. She never grabbed Rory by the jersey. Your Honor, there's something else that opposing counsel said during their closing argument, and that was that this was entirely foreseeable, that it was just obvious. But Your Honor, there was not a single witness today who took that stand and said, yes, I foresaw Rory suffering serious injury. And there were a bunch of witnesses. Opposing counsel called the rest of the team the hit squad. But opposing counsel couldn't find one of those members of the team to come and confirm the allegations in today's case. And without that evidence, opposing counsel has failed to prove to you that this was foreseeable. Your Honor, fact number 2. Miss Taylor just had no idea that Rory was going to die during practice. Now, I introduced portions of Miss Merriweather's deposition where she talks about how soccer practices were run at Waco High. And the students are allowed to take breaks whenever they want them. All they have to do is ask. They can go and talk to the trainer, Miss Merriweather. Again, all they have to do is ask. And that's the whole reason why the trainer was there, to help students and to give them advice if they ever feel unwell. And Your Honor, it was undisputed that Rory never went over to Miss Merriweather and complained of any symptoms. No one, not Miss Saracen or any other member of the team, ever said anything about Rory feeling poorly or needing a break. And now, the plaintiff has pointed to a list of symptoms Rory had during practice, according to Miss Saracen. Now, they told you that those symptoms should have indicated to Miss Taylor that Rory was in serious trouble, that she could be at risk of dying. They argued that Rory was struggling, breathing heavily, and that she looked tired. But Your Honor, of course she did. She was running around at soccer practice. There wasn't a single person on that team who didn't look tired, who wasn't sweating, who wasn't out of breath. That's the whole point of a practice. Well, next, they argue that Rory was feeling funny and had chest pains. But the only person she ever told that to was Miss Saracen. And you heard today that Miss Saracen kept that information to herself. She never shared it. They also argued that Rory Street looked pale that day. But Your Honor, opposing counsel showed us a picture of Rory. She had a naturally fair complexion. It wouldn't have been out of the ordinary for her to look exactly how she looked in that photograph. And finally, Your Honor, their expert listed hands on her hips as a symptom of heat exhaustion, which, Your Honor, honestly, that's not a symptom of anything. And it certainly doesn't indicate that Rory is about to die. Your Honor, they also mentioned that at one point Rory was groaning and convulsing. And of course, that behavior was really troubling. But that didn't happen until after she'd already collapsed. That shows just how sudden and unexpected Rory's death was. And when we're talking about foreseeability, we just can't forget that Coach Taylor didn't know Rory had cocaine in her system. Nobody knew that Rory had cocaine in her system, and that includes Rory's best friend. The plaintiff has failed to prove to you that Rory's death was a foreseeable outcome of Ms. Taylor's actions. Now today, we chose to pursue the affirmative defense of comparative negligence. And to prove this affirmative defense, we had to show that Rory's own actions were a proximate cause of Rory's death. And that required us to answer the question, why did Rory die? Now, the evidence today showed us that Rory Street died from a cocaine-induced heat stroke. But how do we know that? Your Honor, first, we have the medical examiner who says that her cause of death was sudden cardiac death. Now, that doesn't give us a lot of information. Now, we know in this case that sudden cardiac death was caused by a heat stroke. You heard that from opposing counsel's expert, and our expert doesn't disagree with that. That's one thing that both experts agree on, but that's where opposing counsel's expert, plaintiff's counsel, stopped their analysis. And that's a problem because it's not good enough just to say heat stroke. We have to know why that heat stroke happened. There's not a single sentence in their expert's report that explains what caused that heat stroke. And without that explanation, their expert's report is incomplete. Now, we know that the heat stroke was caused by three separate things. First, cocaine, 60 nanograms per milliliter that was found in her blood. Next, we know that it was hot that day, 105 degrees. And third, we know that Rory was doing intense physical activity at practice that day. Now, our expert told you that cocaine use can induce hyperthermia, which lowers the threshold for heat stroke because it inhibits the body's natural cooling process. But it wasn't just our expert who told you that. And you certainly don't need to take our expert's word for it. Because we showed you the scientific literature to back that up. And in this learned treatise, it says if cocaine use is combined with overexertion in extremely hot conditions, then it would only serve to exacerbate the risks associated with heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Now, I know what plaintiff is going to tell you in a moment when I'm done with my argument. They're going to tell you that if Miss Taylor caused the physical exertion, then she's responsible. But that's not consistent with the law. If Miss Taylor didn't know about the cocaine, she could not have known that that physical exertion was putting Rory at risk of death. Now, we have no idea what would have happened on September 7th if Rory had showed up to practice without cocaine in her system. But we do know one thing, that not any other single member of that team, not the coach, not the trainer, not any of Rory's teammates suffered from heat stroke or heat exhaustion that day. And make no mistake, they all were using and physically exerting themselves during that day. And you heard that other people were doing drills. Your Honor, I want to leave you with one final thought. I think we can all agree that Rory Street's death was a tragedy. There's just no other words for it. She was only 18 years old, and she left behind a loving family and countless friends. It's understandable that they would want answers about why this happened. But the answer is that no one could have seen this coming, including Miss Reese Taylor. And I know that that's an unsatisfying answer, but it's also the truth. That's why I ask you to find Miss Taylor not liable. Thank you.
Mr. Leidig, you have 10 minutes and 2 seconds remaining for your rebuttal.
Okay, Your Honor, I have no intention of using all 10.
You can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. As I was listening to Mr. Booth's closing argument, I heard something that's alarming. I heard something that was disturbing, but I heard something that was familiar. I heard Mr. Booth say the plaintiff will fail to meet their burden of proof, but that we didn't call any of the teammates. And that's a part of the reason why we failed to meet our burden. And if I may invite the court's attention, Your Honor, to your own pretrial order, you stated the plaintiff can't call any other witnesses, can't call any of the teammates, but can only call Aubrey Saracen and Jordan Street. Apparently, Mr. Booth wants me to break a legal document in order to think that he can escape responsibility. And that's the disturbing portion, because we are seeing how far the defense will go to escape responsibility in today's case. And it started with Coach Taylor, and it started on September 7th of 2018, and it should end in this courtroom, right here, right now. There's no excuse for Coach Taylor's excuses. There's nothing that remedies Coach Taylor's actions. There's nothing that remedies the risks Coach Taylor took, the common sense she said that she should have applied by giving her players breaks. Common sense. And if she would apply that common sense, Your Honor, maybe this could have all been avoided. But because Coach Taylor knew that giving breaks and making sure they weren't running in 100-degree heat to the point where their bodies collapsed was common sense, and would have applied that common sense, because she failed to apply it, she's liable. And that's the fact. We ask that common sense be applied here. And we make sure that excuses of sending students running in 100+ degree heat on the field until they collapse does not go unpunished. We ask that you find the defendant, Reese Taylor, liable for the death of 18-year-old Rory Street. Thank you.
Right, court is in recess. First of all, well done, both of you. That was a good round. I need all of my judges to submit their ballots to Robert. I will go and then confirm once we have all of those ballots, and then I will come back and release you. Please do stay in the Zoom room until we have confirmation that all of the ballots are here, and I will be back to let you know shortly.